Right. And I'm just talking about a few hours here. If you fail to pay them for a week or 2 weeks or even the whole month, that balloons up. And so you've got huge companies, Walmart, Chipotle. I mean, you're talking about public companies with legions of lawyers that have gotten into problems with failing to pay minimum wage or not keeping up with all of California's complex labor laws.
You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. This is Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Happy New Year to all. This is the first show I'm recording in the new year. I mean, I've only done 9,000 in the past 14 years. It's January 6th. And, one of the nice things that happens if you're a low-wage employee, even if you're not that low wage anymore, come January 1st, generally, many states and municipalities, counties raise their minimum wage. So you might have gotten a raise and you didn't even know about it. If you're an employer, though, this opens up a whole Pandora's box because you better be paying that minimum wage and not a penny less, because if you do, you could get sued. Have an expert on with us now, Parag Amin, attorney from the People's Republic of California. And Parag, it's great to have you on the show. So you're a fast food restaurant and you forget to increase your staff's pay because, the bookkeeper missed it, and you don't do it for like a month. What can happen to you for not paying the state minimum wage in a place like California?
Oh, Kerry, you could be looking at closing doors. I mean, it is severe. So if you fail to pay minimum wage, what can happen for any time worked? What can happen is you owe them the minimum wage. You're going to owe them back pay for every day that you failed to pay them, plus interest. And if they sue, you have to pay their attorney's fees. So let's say for every $1,000 you failed to pay an employee per employee, you're probably realistically looking at, after even the first month, at least $3,000 to $5,000 that you're going to pay.
Per employee?
Per employee.
Oh, my God. And if you got like 30, 40 of them, that could put you under.
Right. And I'm just talking about a few hours here. If you fail to pay them for a week or 2 weeks or even the whole month, that balloons up. And so you've got huge companies, Walmart, Chipotle. I mean, you're talking about public companies with legions of lawyers that have gotten into problems with failing to pay minimum wage or not keeping up with all of California's complex labor laws.
Yeah. So if you forget to pay them for lunch, because if they work through their lunch, that's like another hour you got to pay them for, right? And if you don't pay them for lunch, you got a whole plethora of potential liabilities there too.
Right. Yeah. So you've got two issues. One, they work through their lunch break, and let's say you didn't pay them. Well, that's a missed meal and rest break, which is a penalty. And then you can have a failure to pay for the time, which is a different penalty and different interest. So you can get hit twice in the same violation.
And there's like companies out there that haven't been paying their workers for years, right? For these breaks.
Yeah, that's right. And then so what happens then is, so we just talked about this example. They worked through the lunch. You didn't pay them for the lunch. You didn't give them their meal and rest break. That's a violation. Now, the wage statement you gave them is inaccurate, which is another violation. So as you can see, these things balloon up. And so what happens is California enacted the Private Attorney General Act. And so the way that works is private attorneys are essentially deputized to be able to bring these lawsuits on behalf of the state of California against employers, including huge ones like Walmart, Chipotle, et cetera. And so what happens is the state also gets a huge windfall of money from the recovery, over half for penalties. And a percentage of that goes to employees, the aggrieved employees, the ones who are actually wronged. And then the government keeps the rest. And the benefit to the state is obviously not only does it get this money, but also it didn't have to spend any money to get it because it deputized a private attorney doing all the work. to go get it.
My goodness. Why does anybody have a business in California? That's what I would like to understand.
Well, California is still it's the top economy in the country, the biggest economy. It's higher than many other countries around the world. So from an economic strength perspective, I think it comes down to the sheer population that California has combined with the weather. If it didn't have both of those things, I think that California would get heavily punished for its policies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, well, but, the states that don't penalize their businesses are growing 5 times faster than the states like California, New York, Illinois. Any blue state you could point your finger at is growing slower than the top red states. So here we have the top 5 by GDP states. California is 3.3 trillion, Texas 1.87 trillion. All right. And Texas has roughly 30 million people. California's got 40 million, New York 1.56, Florida is number 4 at 1.11, and Illinois 875. So of those states, the top 5, the 2 that are growing the fastest are the ones that hassle their businesses the least.
There's certainly something to be said about that, Kerry. I think that there should be a balance. Even in the numbers that we just heard, you still hear that California is almost twice that of Texas, even though the population isn't twice. So there is an aspect of doing business in California that I refer to it as the weather tax. A lot of people want to be here, closer to the ocean, enjoy the nice California weather. But again, I think that there's limitations to what businesses and people are willing to put up with. And we've seen a large exodus of businesses from California due to California's policies.
Yeah, in Florida here, they say the wage rates are lower than elsewhere in the country. They say you get paid in sunshine in Florida. And in addition, though, we have no state income tax, and companies pay a smaller income tax. And our government is our budget is less than half of New York State's government budget. So a lot of that GDP could be artificially inflated by government expenditures, because in California, you got the highest taxes in the country. You got the highest paid government workers, all these things. But getting back to our main topic here, you're basically a target. Do you just pay more than the minimum wage so you don't have to worry about it? Is that what you look to do here? That won't get you for the breaks, or like they had wash up time where you wouldn't pay the employee for 5 minutes while they put their aprons on and their hats. And then the state figured out you should have been paying them for that. And that turns into like a huge liability. Is there any way to avoid all this short of moving out of the state?
No. So what you have to do is, it's an interesting question, because the question is, if I pay more than minimum wage, then do I get out of this issue of failure to pay minimum wage? And the short answer is maybe, but not really, because you get out of one potential problem, which is the issue of failure to pay minimum wage is failure to pay minimum wage for all time worked. Now, if somebody works an hour and they weren't paid, that's still a failure to pay minimum wage for that hour. So there's that issue. And then you've got a broader issue of the penalties and interest are calculated based on what the person should have been paid, which can become a complex calculation based on the regular time plus potentially overtime and bonuses and incentive comp. So you could still potentially end up paying way more just because you're paying the person more. Meaning, said differently, if you were paying the minimum wage, your penalties and interest, et cetera, would be based on that minimum wage. But if you're paying them a higher wage, then those numbers are going to be based off that. So you're going to be looking at an overall larger number. So to answer your question, Kerry, the best thing to do is just to ensure you're in compliance, which is very, very difficult to do, but it's absolutely necessary because the penalties and the repercussions are so high.
Can you do an audit to figure out if you're screwing up here, and then you go correct it on your own so you don't have to worry about someone coming after you?
Absolutely. So it's a double-edged sword, and I've had clients do this because being an attorney who helps a lot of business owners with employment and business dispute matters, we have clients who will come in with this issue. And here's the concern that comes up a lot of times is you'll have people who have built these companies where, for example, some people really prefer to be 1099s. So they say, look, these workers, maybe it's trucking, maybe it's the cleaning business, but regardless of what industry it's in, a lot of times people prefer to be 1099s, and that way they can write off certain expenses, et cetera. But the problem with it is California has a very strict rule with who is considered an employee. And there's something called AB 5, Assembly Bill 5, that was passed that severely restricts who can be considered an independent contractor. And so none of the requirements have anything to do with what the employer wanted or what the other person wanted, the independent contractor or the employee. That's not really considered. And so it's almost impossible to pass that 3-point test.
Yeah, like Uber drivers are now considered employees, right?
Well, so there was a special exemption to that. They would have been, yes. But then there was a proposition that was passed to allow them to continue operating in that manner. But Uber and Lyft spent a tremendous amount of money, talking about billions and billions of dollars, to help get that proposition passed. But everybody else who's not Uber and who's not Lyft in this rideshare economy business, they're stuck with this, with Assembly Bill 5, because the 3-part test is they have to have an independently established business. They have to be in a business that's different than yours, and they have to be free from your direction and control. All 3 of those things have to be true for them to actually be considered an independent contractor. And if they're not passing that test, then they're an employee. And what happens is if you 1099 them, you've got all the things that we just talked about, including failure to pay overtime, which, by the way, in California is if you go over 40 hours a week or over 8 hours in a day. So a lot of people get that wrong. Or if you've got a situation where they missed a meal or rest break, you've got a problem there. If you didn't pay minimum wage for all the time, you've got a problem there. And then, of course, you've got all your attorney's fees. And then you've got PAGA that we just talked about, which a lot of employers don't realize. And what happens is they're doing this across scale, multiple people. And so recently we settled a PAGA case for a client where they were doing everything right, including, or seemingly at least they thought, including their people are making 6 figures a year, Kerry. 6 figures a year.
6 figures. They're not exactly the people who are being exploited by the evil business owners here.
That's right. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's the business owners who are barely making it. They take all the liability, the risk to create this business. And the reality is in California, the individual business owner is responsible for unpaid wages, meaning you cannot just bankrupt the business out of it. You cannot close the business and not have to pay it. You're personally responsible. And to add to that, when it comes to PAGA penalties, those you cannot even discharge in bankruptcy. They follow you forever because they're considered government penalties that you as a matter of public policy and law, you can't get out of government penalties by declaring bankruptcy.
That's nuts. All right. Well, I guess an ounce of prevention is worth many hundreds of thousands of dollars of cure. And people want to find out more about you, Parag, how you can help them in these situations. How do they contact you? How do they connect with you on the web?
Yeah, my pleasure to help them, Kerry. They can reach out to me at www.lawpla.com. That's www.lawpla.com. And they could find me on Instagram or we've got a TikTok now. It's Parag. So my first name, Parag, last name, Amin, Aminesq.
All right. Excellent. Well, hey, being a solopreneur, I have some contractors, but I'm here in Florida, so I don't have to worry about California. I would move if I lived in California. I don't care about the weather or whatever. It's almost as good here in Florida. Sometimes it's better. Sometimes it's a little worse in the summer, whatever. If you've got a question for Parag or myself, email kl@kerrylutz.com. You'll find a link to Parag's site in the show notes of this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. And just ask when you go there, sign up for your free newsletter like over 60,000 other FSN community members have. Parag, really appreciate you coming on. We'll talk to you again soon.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.